Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno. This is my good buddy Sam back here laying down in the background. And over here you can see Fizzgig. And up on the bed you can't see over there is my little Chihuahua Bria. We're all carnivores and we love it. We love the way it's done for our bodies. We love what it's done for our health. It's been truly amazing going on this journey now. Almost 3 years. I started January 14th of 2021. So in just about 3 weeks, I will hit 3 years of eating only meat, water, and salt. For the vast majority of it, I have eaten nothing but meat, water, and salt every day for nearly 3 years. And it has been the best thing to happen to my body in my entire life. The only thing that would be better than this is what helps us with dealing with that grave that we're all going to wind up in someday. Well, we're going to be celebrating Christmas in the next couple of days, and hopefully you know that's what Christmas is all about. It's celebrating the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and that definitely was the most important thing that ever happened in my life because it solved the main problem that all of us have the moment we're born, is what happens afterward. But as far as my physical life goes, this diet has changed things in ways that I never thought possible. I mean, I had some inkling that it could help with the gut issues that I started doing it for, but I had no idea it was going to change everything like it has. And if you've adopted a carnivore way of eating, whether it's lion diet like I do, or some sort of ketovore or a keto diet, or just all meat carnivore, whatever meats you want to eat, a lot of people get tremendous healing from that, but when we get together at Christmas, it can lead to a little bit of contentious discussion, a little bit of difficulty knowing how we're going to talk to people about the things that are going to be obvious, especially if you've been doing it for a little while. I mean, when I look at pictures of myself from before, I don't even recognize that guy. I get those memories that you get when you have Facebook. They pop up and show what you posted a year or two ago, or 3 or 5 or 10 or 12 or however long you've been on Facebook. And I keep seeing these pictures of this strange guy with my wife. And I think, that was me? I was used to living in that body before. But it still shocks me, even after 3 years, when I look and see the condition that my body was in prior to eating this way. So people are going to notice if you've been doing it long enough. But if you haven't been doing it long enough and you haven't researched it as much as you would like to, but you're willing to give it a shot because like me, you were at the end of your rope. You just felt like you had no other way to turn and you heard some good things and you thought you were going to give it a try. Well, when you get together at Christmas, you're going to get a lot of naysaying going on. You're going to get a lot of people who love you and who you love who are going to say things that are going to go against what you're doing simply because we are all terribly misinformed about food, nutrition, and health. And there's some reasons for that. I'll cover those reasons as I cover some of the main objections that we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of data to try to bring along because you don't want to go to your Christmas party with a notebook full of information and pictures and all kind of stuff. You just want to be able to have a conversation if somebody wants to have that conversation. But then that comes back to this point. You may want to find out if the person who's asking you about your diet really wants to have this conversation right now. And this is where I would like to start. Do you want our gathering together as a family, this thing that maybe only happens once a year for us, maybe even less often than that? Do you want it to be focused on what I'm eating, or do you want to focus on what the holiday is actually about? Do we want to focus on the Lord Jesus Christ's birth, which is the story that has changed everything for mankind? Or do we want to focus on why you're not eating what I'm eating and why you're wrong? That may not be the discussion anybody wants to have. There's going to be a few people who, even if they're not the ones asking about it, they're not going to want to hear the conversation about nutrition, especially when they came here to splurge. So it could be a difficult subject to even breach. I recommend avoiding it if you can. And if somebody is truly interested, if somebody really wants to know, if somebody sees that you're getting healthier and they want to know more, I would say sit and talk to them afterward. email them later, call them later, FaceTime them later. There's so many ways that we can communicate with each other these days. There's no excuse for us not to have this conversation at a time that's more apropos for talking about something that you and I are trying to work out. But if at the same time your family thrives on argument and you guys like to talk about all these things, that's not uncommon. I mean, it's very common to have a very My Cousin Vinny movie type of situation where your family thrives on arguing. You like to discuss things. You like to debate things. If that's the case, you might want to have a little ammunition for your belt for when you go into the ring talking about something that's going to go against what their doctor says, what all of their understanding of nutrition says, what every commercial says, what all the TV shows say, what all these different things that they have heard throughout the past 50 or more years that we have been given bad information when it comes to nutrition. So if you wind up in that conversation, you're probably going to have one of a few objections. The first one is likely to be dealing with cholesterol. The focus here is usually LDL cholesterol because it's the bad cholesterol that we've all been taught. And there's a reason why this is the notion. You're not going to be able to give them all the history around how we got there, but you can give them one person's name to help you understand why LDL got such a bad name, and they can even look at the research. They can look at the evidence themselves if they wish to on their own and decide if the person who was responsible for this being a part of our zeitgeist was pursuing his own agenda and trying to prove his own theories, or if he was actually doing science, if he was actually using Occam's razor to make sure that the experiment is tested against things that would show that the theory was false, or did he include certain data that he liked and exclude certain data that he didn't like because he wanted to prove his hypothesis right. That person in this case is Ancel Keys. When you dig into his studies and presentations, there is clear evidence that he cherry-picked the data to support his hypothesis and drew conclusions that could not be drawn with all the data considered. There's too much evidence here to cover at a family gathering, but if you will, you could say this to whoever you're speaking to. If you would just Google search the name Ancel Keys and the word carnivore together, you will see people showing the evidence that his data did just that. You will also find plenty of examples of people who have very high LDL and are in peak health. Not to mention, some studies show that higher cholesterol has no association with morbidity, but lower cholesterol does have some association with morbidity, which means that having lower cholesterol tends to result in death far more often than having higher cholesterol in general. And even when you research Eisenhower, who was kind of the focus at the time because Eisenhower was our president, he had a heart attack and there was this big health scare for heart problems, and he had just eaten a hamburger, and there was all these things going on swirling around this, on top of the fact that you've had the seed oil industry pushing its way into the mainstream, basically giving us industrial lubricants to use for cooking oils and things like that. When you combine those two things and you combine some of the ideologies that got Ancel Keys to the point where he believed that it was the animal fats that were the problem, that eating meat was the problem, you realize that his data doesn't support his theory. The data that was available to him doesn't support his theory. Recent studies show that a good HDL number that's up higher is a far better predictor for good health than any numbers that deal with LDL, high or low. And high triglycerides can lead to pancreatic disorders. If your pancreas isn't working right, you're not going to make it. My triglycerides number and my HDL numbers are very big indicators of my overall health being excellent when it comes to cholesterol. And ultimately, I don't give any consideration to LDL anymore because it was a false premise to begin with. And hopefully that'll slam the door shut on that conversation until maybe if they're actually interested in knowing more, they research some of the numbers and you guys talk later. The next objection you're going to often get is there's not enough nutrients in meat. You're not going to get what your body needs. Things like fiber, potassium, magnesium, polyphenols, vitamin C. These are all things that are often thrown up to people who are on a carnivore way of eating as that these things are going to be deficient in your diet and that's going to cause a problem. Well, let's talk about those. My immediate response is it's just not true. Most of the misconceptions we have about all of these things all deal with marketing techniques that companies have used to get you to buy their product. They're trying to sell you something that's going to get your heart healthier. It's going to get your poop going. It's going to get your whatever electrolytes you're low on or something. Everybody's trying to sell something, and I can understand that. There's nothing wrong with selling things. But I think a big problem has come out of the fact that there has been too much playing with the data. There's been too much politicizing of the data for us to be able to say anything that is factual when it comes to these things in these commercials that people are playing, when it comes to Cheerios being better for your heart, or it comes to Wesson oil being good for you. These things simply aren't good for you, but people just don't know it. They've been told that they are good for them. So first, let's take a look at fiber. There is no evidence that fiber is good for GI health. But if you have a GI doctor, that's about the only thing they've been told, is that fiber is the key. This whole notion starts with seeing the human body as a plumbing system. And the reason why this is even a subject is because of the influence of people like John H. Kellogg, grasping to any idea that supported his ideological objection to consuming meat, sexual desires, and his obsession with colon cleansing. Some of the things that he came up with as ideas for helping you to be able to be more regular and be better for your body, he made this percussion machine that basically would punch you in the gut over and over because it was supposed to help break up fat and break up stool and make you be able to go to the bathroom better. Like that's going to actually do something that's beneficial for your body. This all comes from Kellogg. Now, this also led to all of our unfounded beliefs that involve meat, constipation, and colon cancer, which are all part of the erroneous need for fiber debate. And I know a lot of you do know, but I'm going to show you real quick here. John Harvey Kellogg was the founder of Kellogg cereal, and he had a lot of very strange ideas about things. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, but when you read into his philosophies on being able to eat foods that would keep you from having a sex drive or wanting to masturbate, and then also the ideas that he had for cleaning the colon. I mean, he's the one that came up with the enema, basically. He was obsessed with regular bowel movements and making sure that they were full and large bowel movements. But yet, it was his advertising for his company, the things that he was promoting and pushing, that were the founding blocks for exactly what Ansel Keys would wind up taking in the 1960s and making that a part of the American diet, making that a part of nutritious eating in the American diet. And even though at the end of the 20th century, we see obesity levels rising, we see diabetes level rising, we see general metabolic health disorders rising, everything from IBS to ulcerative colitis. And there are people who are reversing these disorders on a carnivore way of eating, by the way, but we're seeing a rise in those things after we've implemented the guidelines that follow the recommendations of people like Kellogg and Keys that have driven us into a direction that they led us into, whether for ideological reasons or for personal gain or both. Either way, they've gotten us off track tremendously when it comes to this argument. There is no evidence that our bodies need to have polyphenols. There are plenty of claims that promote their healthy aspects, but nothing but conjecture is leading that charge. I think it actually kind of stems from a perception bias that we all have, is that we need to take something to get better. We need to take something to feel better, to heal our body, to heal problems, to lose weight, whatever it is. And ultimately, it comes down to what you remove from your diet that can make all the difference. Carnivore diet is an elimination diet. You're eliminating tons of things that were never in the human diet before about 150 years ago. You're removing things that are in our diet now in quantities that would make the people that started eating sugar and things like this, it would make their heads spin how much we eat today. And it's completely normalized in our thinking, so nobody really fights with it. And even people who know better still struggle with the bias that's going on in their mind that they've been preached all their life. It's hard to change those norms and standards that you've established because they told you in school, and they told you at your doctor's office, and they told you when you were in the hospital, and they told you here and everywhere else. Every time you turn on the TV, they're telling you what you need to take to get healthy. But it's more about what you need to get out of your body that doesn't belong there to get healthy. Low potassium and magnesium have not been a problem for me at all. I started off doing no supplements. I only added some supplements in later because I started having a much more active lifestyle, and I felt like I could use a little bit of an electrolyte boost. Plus, early on in this diet, I was using a lot of salt because that was an important part of my transition from eating the kind of foods I was eating on the standard American diet to eating this way. And I thought I was just going to be eating salt like this all the time and drinking it with my waters like I have been for 2 years. My third year, though, my salt intake went down tremendously, but I'm still taking my supplements for magnesium and potassium because I like to stay active. I like being able to use my body finally and have the energy to do the things I want to do. But even without the supplements, I still had excellent blood numbers on potassium and magnesium. Potassium has never been a problem for anybody that I've seen who's a carnivore, with the exception of somebody who was on some kind of medication coming into the carnivore way of eating that had an effect on their potassium level being low. And since just about everybody is taking some kind of medicine, because doctors are handing them out like candy these days, there's a very good chance that the people you're talking to might run into some problems when they start a carnivore way of eating because of the medications they're on. I was on several medications when I started, and if I'd have continued taking my blood pressure medicine while I was on my first 3 months before I went to see my doctor, I probably would have passed out a few times because my blood pressure numbers came down so quickly that within 30 days, I stopped taking my lisinopril, and I didn't have high blood pressure anymore. My doctor was relieved, and when he saw me, he said, "Yep, you don't need that anymore. You haven't had any in 2 months, and your blood pressure is still excellent." That's wonderful. So the medications can play a role, but once you start to get your body healthier, you're going to notice a bigger difference, and we'll cover more of that in a moment. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk more about magnesium when I get to kidney health shortly. And one more area in this first objection is vitamin C. Everybody knows vitamin C is excellent for you. It's important to take a lot of vitamin C if you want to keep from getting sick. They made the airborne stuff. I think some teacher supposedly made this high vitamin C supplement that she could sell that would keep her from getting sick. And it may have helped her to keep from getting sick because having vitamin C when you're taking in a lot of carbohydrates can be very important. But when you're not taking in a lot of carbohydrates, it appears you don't need to have very much vitamin C. Now, people will often revert back to the old thing that they've learned about with the sailors back in the 1700s and the 1600s who would get scurvy because they were on ship vessels and all they had was dried meat and grog to drink. And then they figured, well, it's because all they had was dried meat to eat. And when their vegetables ran out, they didn't get any vitamin C from citrus fruits, so they would get scurvy, and you would get bleeding gums, and you would have a number of other issues that would become evident within weeks of developing scurvy. But the problem is carnivores don't get scurvy. I've been doing this for 3 years. I don't have any bleeding teeth. As a matter of fact, I just got back from the dentist because I had to have another crown put on one of my teeth. One of my old fillings had fallen apart on the inside of my tooth, and they had to replace it with a crown. But my dentist is always impressed with how strong my gums are when I go in there. When they clean my teeth with their little pickers and stuff like that, I don't have blood everywhere like I used to have. So if anything, the problem with bleeding gums, the main symptom you would see initially with scurvy, I don't have it at all. And as far as sickness goes, I used to be one of those people that as soon as anybody in the house got sick, I just go ahead and started making plans for what I was going to do with my week off because I was going to be sick in a day or two, because I always got sick when one of the kids came home or my wife came home, or if I went to work or school and somebody was coughing and sneezing, I was almost always the first one to get it next. But as my body has healed over the past 3 years of eating this way, I have progressively gotten better at avoiding illness. 2023 is the first year that I know of where I didn't get a illness of some kind, be it a cold or flu or COVID or anything like that. I don't think I've ever had a fully healthy year in my life. Now, there's still a week left in this year, so maybe it'll happen, but I'm pretty happy with those results. When I'm used to being the one getting sick, my wife and kids have had illnesses on and off throughout the fall and the beginning of this new winter. And they've been around me and they've been coughing and sneezing and wheezing and gagging and whatever they've been doing. And I haven't gotten any of it. And I don't take vitamin C. There is, by the way, vitamin C in meat. There just isn't very much of it. But if you're not eating a bunch of carbohydrates, you're not going to need vitamin C. And again, you could always encourage them. Just go and YouTube search this. Just use the keyword carnivore and vitamin C, or even carnivore and scurvy, or anything like that. Eating fresh meat has no evidence of leading to that. I have no concerns about getting scurvy from not getting enough fresh meat. On average, I'm eating 2 pounds of fresh meat every day, and I'm simply not having any problems with scurvy or lack of vitamin C or staying healthy when everybody else is getting sick. People don't want to find out that they've accepted something that is not true. People also don't want to really do a whole lot to achieve the things that they want. You may not have to make as huge of a change as I did, but because you've been eating this stuff for 48 years like I was, and it has drawn your health down so far that you may be beyond complete repair. But I'm telling you, the experience that I've had on this way of eating has simply changed all of that. One of the next objections you're going to get very often from people is that all that protein is going to be bad for your kidneys and you're going to get kidney stones. Well, let's talk about that. The idea that protein is bad for kidney health stems from a study involving GFR, or glomerular filtration rate, and protein in the urine, where the conclusion was basically that protein was coming from the consumption of protein. But it's later been found that these kidney problems actually stemmed from things like diabetes and other kidney disorders that were not caused from consumption of protein. There's another marker for kidney health that's actually more important for determining whether or not your kidney is functioning properly enough for you not to be on dialysis or dead, and that's creatinine. My creatinine numbers have stayed pretty much level all along. Now there's no inflammation in my kidneys because I'm not eating foods that are highly inflammatory to my body. And as far as kidney stones go, there's very little of the ingredients that are needed for the crystals, or stones they call them, that form in your kidneys. And those ingredients are oxalates and calcium. Those are what form kidney stones. Those are the materials, the building blocks for kidney stones. Well, if you're not eating the building blocks for kidney stones, how would you be getting kidney stones? I had a CT scan done of my abdominal area, and they didn't see any formation of anything like stones. Now, I never had stones before either, except for gallstones back when I was doing low-fat dieting in the late 90s and early 2000s, but I have never had kidney stones. So I can't say that it's gotten better, can't say that it's gotten worse, but I can tell you that my kidney health is excellent. Now, if you've had kidney stones in the past, you're very likely to produce them again. But the key is going to be getting the inflammation out of your kidneys that make your kidneys ripe for getting kidney stones, and then having the ingredients added in that they can use to form those kidney stones. And that's going to mean removing sugar, ultra-processed food, and seed oils from your diet if you really want to have the best overall inflammation reduction for your organs to function properly. Also, drink plenty of water. And if you are somebody who's had kidney stones before, you might want to supplement a little bit of magnesium as well, simply because it's going to help your kidneys be able to process what's going through there a lot easier. Now, there's not a lot of magnesium in meat, but there is enough. Potassium and sodium also help here, but for the kidneys, magnesium is key. And in general, the population is already deficient in magnesium. There is enough magnesium in healthily raised meat for most people's needs, which doesn't just come down to grass-fed versus grain-fed, but it's a good place to start. Since grain-fed is the majority of meat people can access, though, there is plenty more magnesium to be found in organs of these animals, and you don't need a lot of them either, as I know most people are averse to the taste of organs like heart and liver. I know I was. I hated liver. Liver was always my enemy. I remember thinking like I had a top 3 list of things that I hated on this planet. Liver was either number 1 or number 2, but when it comes to eating liver now, as long as it's nice and rare and it has just a little bit of salt on it, maybe some butter, Delicious. Love that liver. And I would rather eat liver than take a magnesium supplement for that purpose, because that magnesium is going to be a whole lot more bioavailable as it's coming in with the protein that is built into that organ than it is going to come in a powder form or something like that. Calcium is also a vital nutrient to our bodies, but too much of it can also lead to some problems. And people focus on drinking as much milk as they can and whatnot to get more calcium. But a lot of times they're adding so much sugar along with that any calcium benefits that they might be seeing are outweighed by the detriment they're doing to their body by consuming so many carbohydrates that just make the entire body less healthy. Meat is not a high source of calcium. There is calcium in it, and it is far more bioavailable to our bodies than any of these fortified products or lab-created calcium supplements. And it doesn't lead to calcium deposits in the heart, arteries, or kidneys. And the last objection that I want to cover that you're often going to hear from people is that eating a carnivore way of eating is going to give you gout. I know that gout is known as the king's disease, and very often in historical connotation, that king's disease relates to eating a lot of meats. But those kings also ate a lot of cakes, and they ate a lot of bread, and they ate a lot of things that weren't available to people that had sugar and sweets hundreds of years ago like they are now. Now we're seeing a lot of regular folks coming up with gout. And thank God I've never had it. I truly thank God I've never had it, because I've known people who have had it and it's extremely painful. And I'm certain if you've ever felt that pain, you're probably going to want to avoid meat, because you've been told that meat's going to cause your uric acid to skyrocket and you're going to have all these crystals in your joints, and then you're going to have these problems. But what we've been left out of this information that we have are a few important factors that play a bigger role than just uric acid levels. So gout is caused by crystals of uric acid that form in your joints. Uric acid in our bodies is a natural process our bodies do when we metabolize purines. And meat is high in purines. But in a healthy person, uric acid combines with ammonia in our kidneys and is basically just excreted out of the body. It's only when that uric acid builds up in the blood and doesn't have a way out of the body, because your kidneys are not functioning properly to clear it out of your system. There's another organ in your body that plays a big role here too. Your liver is what takes purines that we eat and converts them into uric acid. Well, if your liver's not functioning properly, then that's going to cause a breakdown in that process as well, which is going to lead to a buildup of purines, and it's going to lead to a buildup of uric acid in the blood. The two main things that cause problems in the liver are sugar, and that especially deals with insulin resistance, and alcohol, which as far as the liver is concerned, they're pretty much the same thing. Sugar and alcohol get processed in the liver and they cause the same problems. The biggest problem they cause is fatty liver disease. But that fatty liver disease causes the liver to have to work harder to do everything. And if it starts to get to where it can't do what it needs to do to keep your body working right, it can be deadly. Well, sugar and alcohol are two things that are not included in my way of eating. Now, some carnivores do still drink alcohol, but hopefully in moderation, because even small amounts of alcohol and sugar, I think, are detrimental to your overall system. But occasionally I know people are going to do it, so I wouldn't make it a huge deal. We don't want to go around becoming zealots about this stuff, but at the same time, we got to recognize that if we take something that's not good for us, it's going to have a negative effect. And if we don't take those things that are not good for us, it's going to have a positive effect. We sometimes have to fight with emotional battles on that stuff, especially when it deals with alcohol and sugar, maybe some social situations. But if you've constantly got so much sugar coming into your system that your pancreas is producing insulin like crazy because it's trying to deal with all this glucose that's in the bloodstream, eventually your organs are going to get resistant to taking in the glucose, because they're just going to ignore the insulin that hits their little receptors. So you're not able to clear that glucose from your system. And that causes the mitochondria of the cell to sustain damage. And then those cells, which make up your organs, aren't functioning like they should. And you wind up having problems like we're talking about here. All the dogs just jumped up and went crazy. I guess my wife just got home. The important thing to take away is people don't get gout from just eating meat, which does contain a lot of purines. They get gout when they eat a lot of purines and they have a lot of carbohydrates and sugar in their system, and maybe even alcohol, that are causing them to have all these other health problems. And now that I've got all the dogs out there, since my wife and kids and everybody just got home, and I want to go spend some time with them for Christmas too, Everybody's so excited. The one thing I will say, though, for people you're talking to, if they actually have gout or they've had gout before and it's gone away, you might let them know that starting a carnivore way of eating could very well spark a gout flare-up initially, because you're getting those purines in and your liver hasn't healed any, your kidneys haven't healed any. But it's very likely that it's going to be short-lived. And as many people who have told me that they had gout and they started a carnivore way of eating were able to put their gout into remission, and now it's not a consideration for them anymore. If you want to get healthy, you got to look at some other options, because the options we're being given so far, all the stuff that's led us to where we are as far as health goes, whether it's the government leading us a certain way or supposed nutrition experts or all these companies who want to market these products to us, they've got us in a position now where we have to find the answers ourselves, and thousands of people are finding the answers on a carnivore way of eating. All I know is, if you want to look at my story, go back to the very beginning when I started doing this. I did 125 days on lion diet, and I initially was only going to do this for a 6 weeks trial because I had no other solutions. I had no answer for what was going on with my gut problem. Not only was I close to 300 pounds also, and now I'm below my high school wrestling weight, but now all the gut problems are gone. Anxiety, depression, gone. Problems that I used to have for years. My vision improved. I don't get sunburns anymore. There's so many benefits to this way of eating that it's hard for people who start doing it and seeing the benefits not to become apostles for the carnivore way of eating. And there's a lot of carnivore influencers on here on YouTube now who are sharing their stories. Now, we've all got to use discernment when it comes to who we listen to and what they say. But when people are actually listening and thinking and checking some of the facts, they're going to know who's lying and who's not lying, rather than just listening to whoever says what helps their confirmation bias, which is what a lot of us are fighting with when we're on a carnivore way of eating and we're dealing with a lot of people who have been told very differently and don't want to make these changes. They don't want to do any of this stuff. They just want to take a pill and feel better. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be even harder now that you're going to have to get together with family, unless you can let them know we can talk about this another time. And I still think that's the best approach when you're getting together for family like this, when you're getting together for Christmas. But that's my family. We do like to have our arguments and debates, but it's usually over a board game. We don't like to just sit around and argue about everything. And I know you don't want that going on in your house either. But if hopefully you find you can't avoid these conversations, you found this video helpful, and I hope it's been good for you. Well, that's all I've got for this one. I do want to wish you guys a Merry Christmas. I'm going to go spend some time with my family now for my Christmas celebration, and I'll see you guys next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?